Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we're going to talk about failing before you even had a chance to succeed. Because honestly, life isn't always fair, and no matter the prep or work you put in, you might be screwed regardless. Bit of a downer to start there, I do admit, but that's reality. For people that work in an office or have ever had a school project or something along those lines, how annoying is it when you're working on your project and all of a sudden you get sideswiped by your boss or teacher, who announces that what's required on the project has drastically changed, and you just have to rework it on the fly. Like first you had to write a paper, and now you have to switch it over to a PowerPoint presentation. So you scramble and try your best to rework your paper into a PowerPoint, and you get it to where you just throw your hands up and say, that's good enough, I guess, and you go to present it, and your teacher or boss then just casually says, oh, we don't actually need that anymore, you can sit back down. And then you mentally break and end up on the 11 o'clock news. In this situation, you never truly had a chance to succeed. The specs and requirements were shifted all around you, never giving you an opportunity to properly work on it. And then your work was offhandedly rejected because it wasn't wanted anymore. How exactly could you succeed here? Even if you were able to adequately follow the ever-changing requirements, your work wasn't wanted in the end. You literally could not succeed. Well, for our subject for today, we have a similar situation over in Britain, where the Air Ministry asked for a new design, changed what they wanted, and then didn't actually want what was presented to them. No doubt a frustrating situation for the producer. This is the Bristol Type 163 Buckingham. Its story begins back before the beginning of World War II in January 1939, with the aircraft company Bristol proposing to the Air Ministry an advancement on their Bristol Blenheim bomber and attack aircraft. At the time, the Blenheim was considered to be around the maximum of its potential, and so Bristol wanted to propose an upgrade. Using their currently in development Type 156, later known as the Beaufighter, as a template, Bristol's initial attempt to make a dedicated bomber and attack version of the Beaufighter advanced no further than the drawing board. But instead of ending the idea then and there, Bristol took their time refining it, and by 1940, they had refined it into what they called the Type 161, and that would be further refined into the Type 162, given the name of Beaumont by the company. This design was effectively half a Bristol Beaufighter and half a new aircraft. The rear fuselage and tail was to be that of a Beaufighter Mark III, a variant of the Beaufighter that never actually ended up seeing service, while the forward fuselage was wholly new. While Bristol was working on developing this design, completely separate from it, the British Air Ministry would release specification B740 in early 1940. While this specification was not directly aimed at Bristol, and Bristol initially had zero involvement in it, it certainly seems like the Air Ministry was aiming it at Bristol, because the specification was a call to replace the Bristol Blenheim, and preferably use the Bristol Beaufighter as a sort of design template, so exactly what Bristol was already doing. The Air Ministry called for a light or medium bomber, with dive bombing and ground attacking / army support capabilities, with a top speed of at least 300 miles an hour, a bomb load of around 1,000 pounds, and an armament of at least two 50 cal machine guns located in a dorsal turret. Despite this being so clearly aimed at Bristol, only Armstrong Whitworth, Hawker, and Westland submitted designs, and none of them ended up actually winning the competition. The Armstrong Whitworth design was considered to be the closest, but it still didn't meet the specifications laid out by the Air Ministry. But luckily for the Air Ministry, with Bristol developing the Type 162 completely on their own and submitting it in October 1940, the Air Ministry ended up having a design that closely matched the specifications just fall into their laps. As a result, meetings were held between the Air Ministry and Bristol, and while some elements of this design were considered to be insufficient, like a calculated takeoff and landing run that was considered to be too great, a solid initial armament of 10 total 303 machine guns, 4 fixed forward firing, 2 rear firing, and 4 more that could do both, and an estimated top speed above 300 miles an hour, made the design good enough to pursue, and Bristol would begin development of the Beaumont in November 1940. As the initial design was in the early stages of its development here, further meetings led to an initial design alteration that swapped out the single-fin Beaufighter tail with a twin-fin tail, likely desired for improved stability, and it was this twin-fin version that in February 1941 received an official contract for 3 prototypes, and the first flight was anticipated to take place sometime in the latter half of the year. However, about 5 months or so into its development, the Air Ministry would throw Bristol a curveball that forced them to significantly modify the Beaumont design, and its timeline was pushed back significantly as a result. While a new specification in B241 was written around the Beaumont's design, the specification also included pretty significant performance improvements and an alteration to the aircraft's intended roles. Instead of being a more multi-purpose attacker, the design was to focus purely on being a higher performance bomber, and thus the requirements for dive bombing and ground attacking were removed. In conjunction with this, the requested top speed was increased up to 360 miles an hour. The requested bomb load was increased fourfold up to 4,000 pounds, and the range of the design was to be at least 1,600 miles. This drastic increase in desired performance was due to the Air Ministry knowing both that rapid aircraft evolution would quickly make the Beaumont as it stood now obsolete, and that it would be a year or two, maybe more, before it would begin seeing service. So in that sense, this was actually a very forward-thinking move by the Air Ministry. But in another sense, for Bristol, this effectively kind of negated a lot of their work on the Beaumont, and forced them to significantly alter the design. And this redesign warranted a new type designation as the Type 163, and a new official name as the Buckingham. Measuring in at 14.27 meters long, 21.89 meters wide, and 5.33 meters tall, despite Bristol initially starting with the Beaufighter as a template. At this point, any resemblance it had to the Beaufighter was basically just superficial. Probably the most similar between the two designs was the overall shape of the nose and cockpit. And in the nose of the Buckingham, in addition to the pilot, would be 4 forward-firing 303 machine guns. Just behind the nose and cockpit, you can also see that the midsection of the fuselage is a lot more boxy than it was on the Beaufighter, and that was because of the Buckingham's new internal bomb bay that would hold upwards of 4,000 pounds of explosives. And because of that larger payload, along with the call for greater speed, the wings and engines on the Buckingham were much bigger than what the Beaufighter had, and they would be moved up slightly more towards a shoulder-mounted position rather than a mid-mount. And instead of 2 Bristol Hercules engines like the Beaufighter had, The Buckingham would use a pair of Bristol Centaurus 18-cylinder radial engines, with somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500 horsepower apiece, upwards of about 50% more power than the Hercules. Moving back behind the wing, in the dorsal position would be a turret with 4 additional 303 machine guns, and this turret could rotate 360 degrees, for both offensive and defensive capabilities. Then, down in the ventral position, we have a rather interesting little design decision, because right here in a little gondola would both be a pair of rear-firing 303 machine guns and all of the equipment for the bombardier. Instead of being up by the pilot in the nose or the forward fuselage, the bombardier had his own little private section on the underside. This wasn't a unique design decision or anything like that, as at least some variants of the B-17 actually had something similar, but it is nevertheless an interesting little decision worth mentioning. With this new design to fit the revamped Air Ministry specifications, the previous Beaumont design was officially dropped, and in March 1941, the Buckingham was accepted. But it wouldn't be until late November 1941 that construction of an initial prototype actually began, and this significant delay was because already the Air Ministry was starting to doubt if they even wanted an aircraft like the Buckingham. A lot of Britain's bomber production was geared towards heavy bombers, and a lot of their medium bombers came from America as Lend-Lease aircraft, or just from fighter bombers like the Mosquito. Additionally, at this point in the war, the Air Ministry favored producing accepted and tested designs rather than new ones. You know, they just wanted to pump out what they already knew worked. And so because of this, the Air Ministry ended up spinning their wheels for months, and the project only received any kind of firm traction in mid-1941 because Bristol basically threatened the Air Ministry. Bristol officially complained and told them that they themselves were now losing interest in the Buckingham and wanted clear direction on it, which then led to an order being placed in November for 400 Buckinghams, to begin delivery in March 1943 at a rate of upwards of 60 aircraft a month. Due to a multitude of reasons, though, this initial delivery date was pushed back, and the first flight of the first prototype was delayed as well, in addition to the ever-changing desires of the Air Ministry causing issues for Bristol. The fact that Bristol was also producing the Beaufighter in significant numbers and the Beaufort in smaller numbers meant that their attention was diverted away from the Buckingham, and it wouldn't be until February 4th, 1943 that the first prototype would take to the air for the first time. And by this time, regardless of how the plane performed, the Buckingham basically didn't have a role to fill. For daytime bombing, the Royal Air Force preferred faster and more air-to-air capable aircraft, like fighter bombers and the like, and for night bombing, they preferred larger, heavier bombers and aircraft that had the room to fit radar equipment. And aside from those two major roles, any other roles that the Buckingham could potentially fill were still being adequately filled by imported medium bombers from America and the like. But still, maybe the Buckingham could blow the RAF away and force them to find a role for it. And when it finally took to the air, flight testing revealed a pretty mediocre aircraft. With a top speed of around 330 miles an hour, it wasn't as fast as what was desired. And even worse than that, there were noted vibration and stability issues. The vibration issues were remedied with the installation of new ailerons, and they attempted to remedy the stability issues by fitting larger tail surfaces. These larger surfaces ended up increasing the weight, though, and for a plane that already sat at a gross weight of over 30,000 pounds, increasing the weight at all was not ideal. And indeed, the weight ended up ballooning to upwards of over 38,000 pounds by the end. Test pilots would report that flying the Buckingham felt heavy and sluggish, and because of the instability, the pilots had to be active on the controls at all times, even in what was supposed to be stable level flight, which was pretty tiring. Pilots also found that the controls had a bit of a delay to them, making it pretty miserable to fly overall. And so, as a result, with the Buckingham being poorly received, problematic, and no better than really anything in service at the time, the Air Ministry decided that it would not be seeing service in the European theater. At best, the plan was to move them over to the Pacific to replace a number of Vickers Wellingtons in service over there. But due to the problematic poor performance in testing, it was eventually decided that it wouldn't even see service in the Pacific, leaving literally zero roll for the Buckingham. Nevertheless, though, to keep Bristol production lines warm, so to speak, until production of the planned Bristol Brigand design would begin, Bristol would be contracted to produce a reduced number of Buckinghams, down from 400 to just 119. About half of these were produced as bombers, and the rest, to try and actually get some use out of the design, were modified for use as fast courier aircraft, with all of the armor and armament removed, additional fuel tanks added, and seating for 4 passengers added. But even then, basically none of these planes were used in any significant capacity. None of the bombers saw service, and basically none of the courier models saw service either. They were basically made and then sent to storage, ultimately to be unceremoniously scrapped a relatively short time later. And so, in the end, it kind of feels like the Buckingham was just about destined to fail, at almost every step, whether it be the Air Ministry altering the specs, the Air Ministry slow-rolling the design, Bristol having production issues, the Buckingham got screwed. Bristol kind of had to Frankenstein the design together to fit the ever-changing specs, and after they did, and inevitably the design didn't perform well, the Air Ministry then looked at it and basically just said, nah, we don't want it anymore. Alright, and with that, we're going to go ahead and end for today. So, thank you all for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. So, earlier today, I decided to try quail eggs for the first time. They were only like $3.50 for like 18 of them, so I figured, why not? I mean, would they taste any different, or were they just mini eggs? I kinda had to know. Well, for one, they're a lot more annoying to crack open, so you end up getting less food for more work. And eating them, they just taste like eggs. So they're more expensive, you have to work more to get the food, you get less food, and they taste the same. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something. So, see ya.